What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another reaction. In this, we have Royal Guard mocked at the shooting range, unaware he is SAS's deadliest sniper. Before we dive in, if you guys happen to enjoy, don't forget to smash subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and let's get right to it.
Show us what they teach you at the palace, tin soldier, Nathan Slade smirked, loud enough for half the range to hear. But what they didn't know was that the quiet man they were mocking wasn't just any royal guard. He was Reed Marlowe, former SAS sniper with more confirmed kills than most squads combined. And when he finally took that shot, the entire Yorkshire countryside went dead silent. Before we reveal what happened next...
Yeah, I know they feel absolutely sick. I know they feel absolutely stupid.
Smash that like button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from today. Now let's get into it. The Yorkshire countryside has this particular smell in early spring. Chalk dust mixing with diesel fumes from the access road, cut grass still damp from morning dew, and that crisp bite of air that makes your lungs wake up whether you want them to or not. The Horsby Range Club sat tucked between rolling hills like it had grown there naturally, all weathered stone and corrugated metal that had seen decades of rifle smoke and rain. This wasn't your typical weekend shooting gallery. No plastic targets shaped like zombies. No rental counters hawking overpriced ammo. Just serious marksmen with serious rifles. The kind of place where conversations happened in murmurs and everyone knew everyone's business without asking. The car park told the story. Battered Land Rovers with mud-caked wheel wells, estate cars with discreet gun cases visible through rear windows, and not a single vehicle that looked like it cared about impressing anyone. Reed Marlowe stepped out of his grey Honda like he was getting out to buy groceries. Mid-40s, average height, the kind of compact build that came from years of carrying heavy kit rather than gym sessions. His clothes were unremarkable. Dark jeans, plain black windbreaker, worn leather boots that had obviously walked more miles than most people drove in a year. The only thing that might have caught your eye was how he carried himself. Not stiff like a soldier on parade, but with that economy of movement that comes from being very, very good at staying alive. He signed in at the clubhouse without small talk, nodded to the range officer, a grizzled ex-sergeant who'd seen enough shooters to spot the real ones at 50 paces, and quietly claimed lane 8, while other marksmen were already unpacking tactical cases full of carbon fibre and titanium. Reed simply laid out a canvas rifle wrap that looked older than some of the shooters present. What emerged was a thing of beauty, if you knew what you were looking at. The L-42A1, Britain's answer to precision shooting, when men like Reed were crawling through poppy fields and mountain passes most people couldn't pronounce. Woodstock worn smooth by countless hands, iron sights that had never needed batteries or adjustments, and metal that had that particular patina of something built to last generations rather than impress civilians. Reed assembled it with the same care other men reserved for family heirlooms, checking the bolt action once before laying it gently on the bench rest. Then he did something that would have seemed odd to anyone watching. He just sat there, didn't fidget with equipment, didn't practice dry firing, just opened a steel thermos, poured tea into the cap, and watched the range flags flutter in the distance. Meanwhile, the centre lanes were already buzzing with activity. Nathan Slade had arrived like he owned the place, ex-Royal Marine by his own telling, now running some tactical training outfit that was heavy on YouTube videos and merchandise.
I'm absolutely freaking loving this story. Shout out to the channel. I love the channel because it's stories like this that absolutely keep my attention, 100% of my attention. I feel like my brain loves to run a million miles an hour and loves to think of so many different things. But when I get videos like this, I'm locked in because I need to know what happens.
Big shoulders, bigger mouth, and a custom rifle that probably cost more than most people's cars. The kind of man who turned every conversation into a chance to mention something vaguely military he'd done in some vaguely dangerous place. Right then, lads, Slade announced to no one in particular, unzipping a case that could have housed a small piano. Time to show these weekend warriors what proper fieldcraft looks like. His rifle was a work of art if your taste ran toward intimidation. Matte black everything, scope that belonged on a telescope, bipod, suppressor, and enough tactical accessories to stock a small armory. He set it up with theatrical precision, making sure everyone could see the custom engravings and manufacturer logos. That's when he spotted Reed. Well, well, Slade chuckled, his voice carrying across 3 lanes. Looks like someone's grandfather brought his war trophy. A few of the younger shooters glanced over and snickered. Reed didn't react.
Yeah, don't be coming at my boy Reed like that. Hey, ain't nobody said nothing to disrespect you. Ain't nobody said nothing to you. So don't come at my boy with that kind of disrespect. Chill out now.
Just sipped his tea and continued watching the wind patterns downrange like he was reading a book. This lack of response seemed to irritate Slade more than any comeback would have. He was the kind of man who fed on attention the way engines feed on petrol, and being ignored was like running on an empty tank. Tell me, mate, Slade called out, louder now. Do they actually let you fire that thing, or is it just for the museum display? More laughter from the peanut gallery. Reed kept watching the flags. But at the end of the bench line, an older man in a worn, waxed jacket looked up from his own rifle case. Grey beard, steady hands that had obviously held more than target rifles, and eyes that missed nothing. He watched Reed for a long moment, then shifted his gaze to Slade with something that might have been concern, because he'd seen this before. The loud mouth picking on the quiet professional, and he knew how it usually ended. Slade was hitting his stride now. 3 perfect shots at 400 meters with his space-age equipment, each impact announced with a sharp ping of steel and a satisfied grunt. The small crowd around him was growing, younger shooters drawn by the combination of expensive gear and easy confidence. He worked the crowd like a performer, explaining wind calculations and ballistic coefficients, with the air of a man who'd never met a technical detail he couldn't turn into a story about his own expertise. Of course, it helps when you've done this for real, he said, cycling the bolt with unnecessary flair. Not just standing around looking pretty for tourists. Another glance toward Reed, who still hadn't touched his rifle, still hadn't reacted to any of the commentary, just sat there like a man waiting for a bus that would arrive exactly when it was supposed to. I mean, Slade continued, playing to his audience, fair play to the ceremonial lads. Takes discipline to stand still for hours. But this, he gestured toward his smoking barrel, this takes a different kind of training altogether. One of the younger shooters, couldn't have been older than 25, piped up.
Dang, I love the fact that like my guy's just like he's so unfazed, he's so unbothered. Like let the loudmouth talk, cause that's all he gonna do is talk. I'm just sit here, chill, drink my tea, get ready to take my shots. But for now, just let him talk.
Is he actually one of those guards with the funny hats? Has to be, another replied. Look at him. Probably polishes his boots 3 times a day. The laughter was getting more pointed now, less nervous. Slade had successfully turned Reed into the butt of a joke that was writing itself. The quiet man with the old rifle who didn't know he was outclassed. But the grey-bearded veteran wasn't laughing. He'd closed his own rifle case and was watching the scene with the expression of a man watching someone walk toward thin ice. Not worried exactly, just anticipating. Because Reed's stillness wasn't the stillness of a man being ignored. It was the stillness of a man choosing his moment. After nailing another cluster at 500 meters, Slade decided it was time to make his point more directly. He stood up, rifle cradled across his forearms like he was posing for a magazine cover, and turned toward Reed's lane. "All right then, Buckingham," he called out. "Since you've been sitting there soaking up all this professional instruction, how about a demonstration? Show us what they teach you in that palace of yours." Reed looked up for the first time since the commentary started. Not angry, not embarrassed, just mildly curious, like someone had asked him the time. "I'm not here to compete," he said quietly. His voice carried despite its low volume, the kind of voice that didn't need to shout because it was used to being obeyed the first time. Slade grinned wider. "Come on."
The kind of voice that didn't need to shout because it was used to being obeyed the first time. I love the way that was put.
"Mate, don't be shy. 1 shot. Same distance I've been working. Let's see if ceremonial training translates to actual marksmanship. Reed returned to watching the wind flags. This non-response was clearly killing Slade. The crowd was starting to lose interest, some drifting back to their own lanes. Nothing deflated a showman quite like being ignored, and Slade could feel his audience slipping away.
Yep.
"Tell you what," he pressed, voice getting sharper. "I'll even let you use a proper scope. Can't have you missing because your museum piece doesn't have any real sights." Still nothing from Reed. The grey-bearded man finally stood up and walked closer, positioning himself where he could see both shooters clearly. His movement was casual, but there was something in his posture that suggested he was getting ready for something. Slade tried one more time. "Look, I get it. Must be intimidating being around actual operators after years of standing around for selfies. But come on, even the Palace
Hey.
Guard must have done some basic rifle training, yeah?" That's when Reed finally moved. He stood up slowly, checked his rifle's chamber with practiced efficiency, and stepped toward the firing line. "One shot," he said, not looking at Slade. 700 meters, iron sights." The casual conversation at nearby benches died away. Suddenly everyone was paying attention again.
I
The
bet.
mood had shifted. This didn't feel like entertainment anymore. It felt like something serious was about to happen. Reed moved into prone position, with the kind of fluid economy that comes from muscle memory carved by necessity. No wasted motion, no adjustment. Just one smooth transition from standing to firing position that looked like it had been done 10,000 times in places where getting it wrong meant more than embarrassment. He settled the rifle into his shoulder, checked the wind flags one more time, and went absolutely still. The range officer called out, 700-meter target is active, steel silhouette." Reed didn't acknowledge him, didn't shift position. Just lay there like he'd grown from the ground itself, breathing in a rhythm so controlled it was barely visible. Slade leaned forward, squinting downrange through his scope. "Can't even see the bloody target without optics," he muttered to someone nearby. "This should be interesting." But the grey-bearded veteran was watching Reed with a different expression entirely. Recognition. And something that might have been concern, not for Reed, but for everyone else who was about to learn something they weren't ready for. Reed exhaled once, slow and controlled. The rifle cracked, a single clean report that seemed to cut through the Yorkshire air like a blade. Half a second later, the distant steel sang out, a perfect, ringing note that echoed off the hills behind the range. Dead center. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. Even the wind seemed to pause, like the whole countryside was holding its breath. The range officer raised his binoculars, adjusted the focus, looked again. "Direct hit," he said finally. "Center mass, 700 meters, iron sights." Reed stood up, cleared his rifle with one smooth motion, and walked back to his bench like nothing had happened. He sat down, poured another cup of tea, and resumed watching the wind flags. Slade's jaw was hanging open.
I bet
The
it
crowd
was.
around him had gone completely silent. That's when the grey-bearded veteran stepped forward and
Yeah,
spoke.
I bet he feels sick now. Yeah, you can't say nothing, bro. Your furthest shot was 500 meters. He just went 200 meters past that. First shot of the day. First shot of the day. Yeah, you're not effing with him, bro. You're not effing with him, Slade.
Loud enough for everyone to hear. "Reed Marlowe," he said, nodding toward the quiet man with the teacup. 22 SAS Recce Troop, 4 tours, more confirmed kills than most squadrons combined. That shot you just saw, that's him taking it easy. The silence stretched longer. Then someone whispered, "Jesus Christ." And suddenly everyone was looking at Reed Marlowe, not the ceremonial guard they'd been mocking, but the professional soldier who'd been sitting among them all along. Slade's expensive rifle suddenly looked very ordinary indeed. The atmosphere on the range had changed, like weather before a storm. The easy banter died away, replaced by something heavier. Slade stood frozen by his bench, his high-tech rifle suddenly looking less impressive and more compensatory. Around him, the small crowd that had gathered to watch the show was dispersing quietly, some avoiding eye contact, others stealing glances at Reed like they were seeing him for the first time, which in a way they were.
Facts.
Reed finished his tea without
They
hurry,
were.
rinsed the cup with water from his thermos, and began breaking down the L42A1 with the same methodical care he'd shown assembling it. Each component was cleaned, checked, and fitted into the canvas wrap with the kind of attention you give to something that's kept you alive. A young lad, maybe 19, 20 at most, approached the bench hesitantly. He had that eager look of someone who'd just realized he'd been in the presence of something rare and wasn't sure how to handle it. "Sir," he said quietly, that is, would you mind if I asked about the rifle?" Reed looked up, not unfriendly, just assessing. "What about it?" "It's an L-42, isn't it? From the 70s. I've read about them, but never seen one fired." The boy's voice was respectful now, none of the earlier mockery. "How do you range with iron sights at that distance?" Reed considered the question seriously. "You don't range, you know. Wind, distance, drop. It's all muscle memory after a while, like driving a car without thinking about the pedals." He paused and then added, "Course, helps when you've had proper training and proper motivation to get it right." The implication hung in the air unspoken. In the field, missing wasn't just embarrassing, it was fatal. More shooters were drifting over now, drawn by curiosity and something approaching reverence. Not the celebrity worship that had surrounded Slade earlier, but the quiet respect professionals show each other when rank and ego get stripped away. An older man with rifle club patches on his jacket cleared his throat. "Mind me asking what unit you were with, sir?" 22 SAS, Reed replied simply. "Recce troop, mainly. Some other things that aren't worth discussing." The grey-bearded veteran who'd identified him earlier stepped closer. "Mac Henderson," he introduced himself. "3 para back in the day. Falklands, Northern Ireland. I thought I recognized the signature." Reed gave him a respectful nod. "Good to meet you, Mac." "Likewise." Henderson glanced around at the assembled shooters, then back to Reed. "These lads don't know, do they, what that shot really was?" Reed shrugged. "Just a shot." Henderson smiled grimly. "Just a shot. 700 meters, iron sights, cold barrel, unknown wind. In field conditions, that's the difference between mission success and body bags." The younger shooters were listening intently now, finally beginning to understand the gap between range practice and operational reality. The expensive scopes and tactical accessories suddenly seemed less important when faced with the simple fact of Reed's demonstration. Slade had been silent through all of this, standing apart from the growing group around Reed's bench. His face cycled through several expressions.
He probably felt absolutely sick to his stomach. Slade felt sick to his stomach at this point. He had just disrespected a man that was leagues ahead of him.
Disbelief, embarrassment, something that might have been anger. Finally he approached. "Look," he said, voice lower than before. "I didn't know. About your background, I mean." Reed looked up from securing his rifle case. "No reason you should have." "Still," Slade persisted, "what I said earlier about ceremonial duty, about the palace thing, I was out of line." Reed studied him for a moment. "You saw the uniform, drew conclusions, happens all the time. There was no malice in it, but no absolution either. Just a statement of fact." Slade shifted uncomfortably. "So you're really... you serve with the Guards now, after the SAS?" "Royal Guard is a posting, not a demotion," Reed explained patiently. "Most of us rotate in from active units. Infantry, paras, Marines, Special Forces. The ceremony's just the visible part." Henderson nodded approvingly. "People think it's all pomp and pageantry. Don't realise those lads are operational soldiers doing a different job for a while." "Different job, same standards," Reed confirmed. "You don't get posted to palace duties by looking pretty. You get there by being the kind of soldier who can be trusted with live ammunition around heads of state." The implications of that settled over the group like a cold realisation. The toy soldiers they'd been joking about were actually some of the most thoroughly vetted military personnel in the country.
Dang.
One of the younger shooters spoke up quietly. "So when you're standing guard at Buckingham Palace..." "I'm an active duty soldier with a loaded rifle protecting the monarch," Reed finished matter-of-factly. "Same as any other security posting, just with more tourists taking pictures." The range had grown quiet around them.
Dang.
Other shooters at distant...
And this is like a true story, like for real, or somebody just like made this up. It hooks you in. And like I'm sitting here quietly respecting Reed, bro. I'm not even seeing a video. I don't know nothing about Reed, but just from the story, I'm sitting here feeling absolute respect for the man.
benches were packing up their gear, the day's competitive atmosphere having evaporated into something more reflective. Slade's expensive demonstration had become an expensive lesson in assumptions. Reed closed his rifle case and stood, shouldering his kit bag. "Gentlemen," he said with a polite nod. As he turned to leave, Henderson called after him. "Reed, that shot, what was the actual range?" Reed paused. 750, near enough. Wind was tricky. The target was marked at 700. Reed shrugged. "Range markers are approximate. I pace my own distances." And with that, he walked away, leaving behind a group of marksmen who were suddenly far less certain about what they thought they knew about shooting, soldiering, or the quiet professionals who did both for a living. The gravel crunched under Reed's boots as he made his way toward the car park, the L-42A1 secure in its canvas case, slung over one shoulder. Behind him, the range had settled into an unusual quiet. Not the focused silence of concentration, but the contemplative hush that follows a moment of genuine education. He reached his Honda without ceremony, popped the boot, and laid the rifle case inside with the same careful attention he'd shown all day. No hurry, no fuss, just the methodical actions of a man who'd learned that rushing led to mistakes, and mistakes led to consequences he'd rather not think about on a peaceful Yorkshire afternoon. The sound of footsteps on gravel made him glance up. It was the young lad who'd asked about the rifle, walking over with the hesitant gait of someone who wanted to say something, but wasn't sure they should. "Sir," the boy called out when he was close enough, "I just wanted to say, well, thank you for the demonstration and for setting us straight about the guards." Reed nodded. "No need for thanks. Maybe just remember it next time you see someone in ceremony kit." "I will, sir. Definitely." The boy paused, then added, "My grandfather was too para. He always said the loudest soldier in the room usually isn't the most dangerous one." That brought a faint smile to Reed's face. "Your grandfather was a wise man." As the boy walked back toward the clubhouse, Reed became aware of other eyes on him. Not staring exactly, but the kind of respectful observation soldiers give each other in recognition of shared understanding. Mac Henderson stood by the range office, smoking a cigarette and watching with approval. A few of the other shooters had gathered near their vehicles, talking in low voices that somehow managed to sound both animated and subdued. Only Slade remained at his bench, methodically cleaning his expensive rifle with movements that suggested his mind was elsewhere entirely. Reed closed the boot of his car and walked around to the driver's door. The afternoon was advancing toward evening, painting the Yorkshire hills in long shadows and golden light. In the distance, he could hear sheep calling to each other across stone walls older than his grandfather, and the faint rumble of a tractor working distant fields. Peace. The kind of deep, settled peace that you only really appreciated after you'd spent time in places where it didn't exist. He was about to get into the car when Mac Henderson approached, not hurrying, just walking over with the measured pace of a man who'd earned the right to speak his mind. "Reed," he said when he was close enough, "good shooting today." "Thanks, Mac." Henderson took a long draw on his cigarette, exhaled slowly. "Been coming to this range for 15 years. Seen all sorts. Weekend warriors, competition shooters, ex-military from every service you can name. But I've never seen anyone make a point quite like you did today." Reed shrugged. "Wasn't trying to make a point. Just took a shot." "Bollocks," Henderson said gently.
Wasn't trying to make a boy, just took a shot. I was just out here to take one shot. That's crazy. Came out here to take one shot. Now I'm headed back to the crib. So we'll try to make a point at all.
That was the most educational thing to happen at this range since I started coming here. Half those lads in there are going to go home tonight and think differently about service, about assumptions, about what real competence looks like when it doesn't need to advertise itself. Reed considered this. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Definitely not a bad thing. Henderson flicked his cigarette away and extended a hand. "It was an honor, mate. Genuinely." They shook hands, briefly, firmly, with the understated respect of professionals who recognized each other across the boundaries of unit and service.
Respect.
Reed got into his car and started the engine. As he reversed out of the parking space, he could see through the rear window that several of the shooters had gathered around Henderson, no doubt pressing him for more details about what they'd witnessed. The old para was gesturing toward the distant targets, probably explaining the technical difficulty of what they'd seen. Good. Let them understand. Let them go home with a different perspective on the quiet professionals who served without needing recognition, who carried skills that couldn't be bought at any equipment shop, who wore ceremonial uniforms while remaining very real soldiers underneath. Reed turned out of the car park and onto the narrow country road that would take him back toward London, toward his flat, toward tomorrow's duty roster at the palace. In a few days, he'd put on the red tunic and bearskin cap, take post at one of the ceremonial gates, and stand perfectly still while tourists took photographs and made jokes about toy soldiers. And none of them would ever need to know, that the quiet man holding the rifle was someone who'd learned his craft in mountains and deserts where missing meant more than embarrassment, which was exactly how it should be. Behind him, the Horseby Range Club settled into evening
That's
quiet,
crazy.
the day's lessons absorbed into the Yorkshire countryside like rain soaking into ancient soil. Tomorrow would bring new shooters, new conversations, new demonstrations of skill and equipment. But today had been different. Today, they'd learned the difference between talking about war and having been there. And
Oh,
that, Reed thought as the familiar roads carried him home, was probably worth the price of ammunition. Have you ever misjudged someone based on their appearance? Why do you think the most dangerous people are often the quietest ones? What does
mhm.
it mean when ceremony and combat skills exist in the same person? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one and they help shape our next stories. If this changed how you see the Royal Guards, hit that like button. It tells us we're on the right track. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss our daily stories about the professionals who serve without seeking glory. And
I
if you
love
know
it.
someone who thinks quiet people are weak, share this
Ooh,
video with them.
on
There's another
everything.
incredible Royal Guard story waiting.
I absolutely freaking love this video. Yeah, yeah. I'll put some respect on the names of those royal guards. I didn't. I mean, I wouldn't disrespect them in any way, anyway. But I didn't know that they were like ex-military and not even not ex-military, but active military, who take on that role for a while. So y'all talk to me in the comment section. Tell me what you thought about this story. I was hooked from the beginning to the end. I was locked in. And not only did it definitely, I walked away. I walk away like thinking of things differently as well with a different perspective. So this was an absolutely incredible story, educational story. That's all we have. If you guys enjoyed, don't forget to subscribe, give a thumbs up, check out the next